Hey, before we get in this episode, can you do us a favor? Will you go ahead and subscribe to the channel?
Will you ring that notification bell?
And if you would, give this video a like. Well, enough of that mumbo jumbo. Let's get to the episode.
Let's talk developmentally speaking, glow up, and connecting through wrestling.
Hey everybody, I'm Morty.
And I'm Brian.
And on today's episode of Connecting Through Wrestling, we have Duke the Dumpster Droese. Duke, how's it going?
Going great, man. I really appreciate you guys having me on the show, man.
Well, we appreciate you being on. We'll start out with the same question I ask everybody. What made you get into wrestling?
I loved it as a kid. I was a fan. Growing up, I grew up in South Florida, so I was watching championship wrestling for Florida with Gordon Soley. You know, in the 80s, late 70s through the 80s, and I was just a big fan. I used to go. They had this weekly loop of live shows they would do, and they would come down. The closest they got usually to me was the Miami Beach Convention Center, and every Wednesday, and I would go watch it live. And I just, you know, it was always interested me, and I was coming up through high school sports, a little bit of football, wrestling, of course, amateur. And when WrestleMania 1 came around, it was, my dad took me to watch it at the Miami Beach Convention Center on closed circuit television because there was no pay-per-view then. And I remember just watching that show, and the way it was presented, I knew something different was happening, and it was exciting. And that was the moment that I decided I wanted to be a professional wrestler. So, yeah, that's how I got into it. And it was the hype, the overall show of WrestleMania 1, but the hype behind the main event with the tag match, Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Orndorff, that whole thing, and the Andre versus Big John Studd slam match, man, it was so exciting, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, and that's where it started.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just the whole spectacle of all of it drew you right in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing.
I've always said that I love the atmosphere from, you know, whether you're in the audience or you're there, and the music, the lights, the sounds, the smells, just everything all together just makes wrestling special. And to see,
yeah, you know, I agree, and that's what did it for me. And you know, shortly after that, I started. Interestingly, as an amateur wrestler, we had a fundraiser where the Florida wrestlers like Lex Luger and Dusty Rhodes and all them came and did a show in our high school gym as a fundraiser. And my dad kind of needled around in the locker room and found out somebody that had a school in South Florida with a wrestling ring, basically in a warehouse. And that's where I went and started learning while I was still in high school. I went and started taking bumps and learning the ropes, you know, so to speak. And was trained by a guy named Bobby Wales, Jamaican Jammer. He also trained Norman Smiley. We were both going through his school back in those days. It was late 80s, you know, 86, 87, I think is when we started out. And that's where it all started. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Excuse me. It's so close to like the stories around here with OVW wrestling. We're from Southern Indiana, so growing up, OVW was the local wrestling here, and so you had, you know, the Damaja and Doug Basham, and
I'm sure you know the Hustler Rip Rogers. You know.
Yes.
Did you see the smile? Yeah. We're from Seymour, so we grew up watching Rip. You know, gotcha. Seymour, Indiana's own Hustler Rip Rogers. So.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So I talk about connecting through wrestling. I can connect that feeling because I guess I never really thought that I would get into wrestling, but looking back to being a kid and going to OVW and watching all that, I can relate to that feeling as to why I'm a manager in wrestling now, is because of growing up watching it local, having that local feel. You know, and then, of course, going to bigger shows and feeling that spectacle of it, you know. So I could totally connect with that feeling of growing up with it and it just being right, you know.
Yeah, and it's just something about being in the crowd in the live events and feeling that thing that happens when the wrestlers or the managers are doing their job right and they really get the crowd
Fired up.
invested, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you feel that feeling, man, there's nothing like it. It's unlike any drug or anything else, man. It's a great feeling when you get it and all things are uh, clicking right out there and the crowd's behind you and into what you're doing. It's really quite a feeling, and I think that's what gets a lot of people into the wrestling business, just generally speaking. So,
Mm-hmm.
For sure, and it's the best way I could describe it is you get that feeling in the crowd. I know the way I get flutters through my chest, like, oh, they're excited. But to be performing out there is 10 times that feeling. To actually
absolutely.
to get the pop, to get all or to get the booze. Cause me, I primarily used to always get booze. That's
Yeah, that's your cheers,
right.
exactly.
And people are like, how can you stand having all those people boo and call you names and stuff? I'm like, because it strokes my ego either way. Let's be honest.
That's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, for sure.
So how
Yeah,
long?
yeah, it's no better feeling, man. If you're a heel, those boos are music
Uh-oh.
to your ears.
Yeah. Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
Uh-oh. Are we back?
We're good.
Yeah, we got a little click there.
One
I
second.
think we're back.
One second here. Let me move this computer a little bit over.
So how long did you do the independent scene before the WWF came around?
Doing it on like a part-time basis down in South Florida. It wasn't like the independents now, man, where people are running shows everywhere. It was, pretty select few people were running what they called outlaw shows back in those days. And in Miami at the same time, I was getting in shows wherever I could on the side,
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what I did. I wrestled throughout Florida, and I wrestled down in the Caribbean some with Tyree Pride and Bobby Wales and all those guys, and that's where I kind of my experience. That's where I kind of learned the ropes, and that's also where I started to develop the garbage man character. Before I ever went to the WWF, I started creating that character down in the South Florida shows that I was doing while I was still in college, because I knew I was going to need one of those, to have a chance to make it up in the WWF. So that's why I started to kind of together, and that's where it was born. It started off as the garbage man Rocco Gibraltar on the independent scene, and I did Rocco for almost 2 years probably, and I taped everything I did so I could put together a promo tape and package and everything and resume, etc. And when the time was right, I found an opportunity. I actually went up to McMahon and handed it to him personally, and I knew he would like that gimmick. It was hard working, working class, blue collar, baby face, tough, rugged,
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it all started, really, with that and the gimmick and the independence down in Florida. That's kind of how I came up.
So after you gave your tape to Vince, how long did it take for them to reach out?
1 week. J.J. Dillon called me.
Wow. He's like, I'll take
1
it.
week. Yeah, yeah. And they flew me up for a TV taping in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Bethlehem and Scranton. It was the 2 days of taping after the Raw. They did a Raw. There was a Monday Night Raw where the thing that I remember most, I wasn't there. I hadn't flown up yet, but I was watching Raw. But it was the one where Tatanka was in the ring, and like a couple of the old timers were in there, kind of giving him props, like Chief Jay Strongbow and I don't know, maybe Wahoo McDaniel and some other guys that did Native American gimmicks. They were really kind of pushing and putting to take over. So it was that Monday Night Raw, and those next 2 days of TV taping for Superstars and stuff is where I went up and did dark matches with Reno Riggins, and you know, everything went really well because Reno's a class act, man. He made me look like $1 million. I still thank him to this day, and you know, that's kind of how it started. But yeah, they got in touch with me pretty quick because I think Vince and I believe he looked at the tape with Shane, because Shane came up to me and commented on my tape, which was funny because he said, you know, hey, the tape was really impressive. Who did your tape? That's what he asked. Who did your tape? And the answer to that question was me and my brother sitting in his living room with 2 VCRs and a bunch of VHS tapes.
Yeah.
We just put together. There was no editing machine. There was no editing software. There wasn't even hardly a computer. There was definitely no internet. And you know, there was just I went through literally every move I wanted to use on the tape. I found the counter number on the tape on the VCR, and fast forwarded through and took all these one by one and taped them over to a fresh tape and stacked them all up on that tape. And then my brother put music over it, and it just worked. It's out there on on YouTube now, that old tape I made, Rocco Gibraltar's promo tape, because somebody found a copy of it and put it. It worked, man. I was very fortunate because I didn't have any skills in terms of editing. I just knew kind of what I had a basic idea, and me and my brother put it together. Again, my brother, he's kind of a technical genius when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's how it worked.
Cool.
I can imagine how how difficult that would be. You know, I edit a lot of the videos. He's learning to edit the stuff, and you know, it can be hard on a computer. But I also remember back in, it was probably 2005, I had a video editing machine given to me, and it was from the late 90s, and it was the type that you actually hook 2 VCRs up to, and that was difficult with that. I can only imagine how difficult it would be without having that. So that's impressive. Like,
yeah,
for sure.
So how was
I mean, it was basically all I did is I went through every tape I ever had of Rocco, the Garbage Man, Rocco Gibraltar. And every time I saw something I wanted to use, I wrote the counter number, and I wrote what it was, the move, whatever the spot was, and I had this long list of all the numbers of all the moves, with this huge list of numbers, and then I went through and looked at that, and I created a script of the moves in what order I wanted to use them. So I had the tapes numbered. I had the counter numbers. Like I said, meticulously. I went one tape, fast forward, counter to there, reset the counter, put the new tape in, and it took forever, but man, we got it put together, and it worked pretty well.
Oh yeah, it paid off.
Awesome. It's really cool. He said Reno Riggins. I think I actually am friends with Reno on Facebook. Maybe we can get him on here and we'll talk with him sometime.
Yeah, Reno's awesome. Definitely one of the greatest workers I've ever wrestled. He was really good. He should have been on full-time roster. I don't know why he never was, but he definitely should have been. He's one of those guys that can work with anybody at any level. You know, the joke is, you know, that guy could work with a broom handle and make it look like $1 million. Well, that was Reno Riggins. So he was definitely a good one.
Yeah. So how was the WWF back then? How your career? Like, there was a lot of people. Like, there was a lot of people like Reno. Then you had your main roster, and just how did the flow go? Like the build towards Duke the Dumpster.
The build towards Duke.
Yeah.
Well, when they bring you in, they put you over like gangbusters at first, because they got to give you some strength and establish your character. And they did that with me, and that's always fun because they're putting you over. But then you got to start losing, you know, here and there, and you know, when you wrestle other superstars. But the overall company itself, it was right at the height of the steroid scandal when Vince was in federal court. and the attendance was down, the money was down, the schedule was ruthless. We were traveling so much that you were always exhausted. So it was rough. It was difficult. You know, we really worked hard to kind of keep that ship sailing at that time during that what they called the new generation era. It was difficult, but we worked hard and we kept it going. And you know, not a lot of guys were making a lot of money at the time, but you know, you found out real quick who was there that truly loved the business, and it was just there for a paycheck, because those guys that just wanted it for the money were gone pretty quick. You know, they would kind of check out and either go to WCW or they would just go somewhere else. But yeah, it was tough times, but we still, you know, the camaraderie. I'm telling you, in the locker room, man, we had fun. We cut up guys like Austin when he came in as the ringmaster, Savio Vega and Henry Godwin, the hog farmer, you know, Undertaker, Rikishi, who was Fatu then, Yokozuna, man. We just had so much fun. It was fun. We always were laughing, cutting up, having a good time. So that made it more bearable, you know, the ruthless schedule we were on. It made it more bearable and you know, easier to handle. But they were difficult times, but that was part of the business, man. You had to be tough enough to do that, or you weren't going to last long.
Oh yeah, and you said that new generation, your character, you're one of the most memorable people, and there was a plethora of characters. But Duke the Dumpster has always stood out. So you know that's a testament of how good you are.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. People always talk about how it was the generation of the working gimmicks, the working man, vocational type gimmicks. There was a dumpster garbage man. There was eventually, there was a hog farmer. There was a dentist. There was eventually a plumber. And then they started bringing all these other weird characters. After I left, they still had more. And it was because that has always kind of been, that was Vince's mentality coming out of the 80s. You know, everybody had to have a gimmick of some sort. And he tried to hold on to that. But the business was moving away from that. And it took him a while to get on board. It took him a while, and it took him losing to WCW's Nitro several weeks in a row or for a while from make him to finally bring him to the realization that he had to change his thinking and allow the business and allow the talent to be creative and show what they could do and to entertain the crowd, because they weren't buying that hokey, you know, garbage man dentist bullshit anymore. They weren't buying those gimmicks. I mean, every once in a while you had one come back in like a boogeyman or something, you know, that was different, but that was the exception. You know, it was no longer the late 80s, early 90s where everybody basically had a gimmick, and it just didn't work that way. It had to become a situation where guys were developing into their own characters, and it became like a reflection of their true personality, because that's when guys really started getting over, when they you know, released the reins on Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he got to start talking the way he wanted to talk. And eventually The Rock came, and they got rid of Rocky Maivia and let him become The Rock. That's when things really started to change in that company, and that was the transition that needed to take place. But I mean, I enjoyed my time there, and in my goofy Duke the Dumpster. If I had still been there when the Attitude Era hit, people always ask me what I would have done. Or
I was about to ask that. Yeah,
I always said I would just, you know, we were talking about turning me heel, and I just wanted to be Duke Droese. That was it. No more gimmicky garbage man outfit. No more dumpster moniker. Just Duke Droese, and just get over and be myself. But, you know, unfortunately, things happened the way they did, and I ended up leaving. Unfortunately, and probably fortunately, because, you know, I started to kind of get angry and you know, I was immature about it, especially professionally. And I started getting into drugs, unfortunately. And that's the thing that really hit me. Uh, but I always look back and I think it was probably a blessing that I got out of there before the Attitude Era, because during the Attitude Era, they stopped drug testing too. And that's when a lot of guys started dying. So, whatever, it is what it is. But that's kind of how things happen. Happen in a position where I'm trying to help people that are going through issues with addiction and drug and alcohol abuse. So it's kind of come full circle. But yeah, it was back in those days. It was tough, kind of trying to find your way, especially when Vince really wanted to stick a gimmick on you. So, and sometimes those gimmicks were really bad, really bad. I heard I brought my own gimmick in, so I had some control. But man, when I heard he brought it, do you know the story about Vader? When he brought in Vader, he wanted to name him the Mastodon. He didn't want him to be Vader. He just wanted to call him the Mastodon. But literally, Jim Ross and Jim Cornette fought Vince McMahon and said, no, he is Vader. He's one of the biggest heels in the business. He's a monster heel. And if you really pay attention and you go back and watch some of Vader's early TV matches, you'll hear Vince McMahon slipping in the word Mastodon over and over again.
He does.
Because he wanted him to be the Mastodon. He wanted to put that gimmick. And that was Vince's mentality. If he had a thought for a gimmick, he wanted to stick it on somebody. And that's kind of the way it worked.
Always. So you said, everything's came full circle. So how is Duke these days?
Duke's doing great these days. I've had my trials and tribulations, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I had issues with drugs for a long time, man, painkillers especially, because we were beating our bodies to death, as we do in the professional wrestling business, and that's how it started. But it got worse and worse, and back in 2013, I ended up catching charges because I was out, buying and selling pills with people on the street. And I got busted, and I was a teacher and all these things. I lost the teaching job and all that stuff. And as part of my plea deal, I went through this drug court program, which is a super strict probation, but also drug treatment at the same time. And I had no trouble going through the program because when I got busted, I was done. I knew everything had to change. So once I went to rehab and got physically clean, I went through this drug court program without a problem. And I put in the work, and I learned about myself, the things I needed to learn to kind of fix myself and maintain it for the rest of my life. Just stopping using drugs is just one small step in the process. I learned that I think differently than a lot of people. And if I let that get to me, that's when I start picking up and doing drugs again. So when I finished the drug court program, I did so well. And my background from the University of Miami was criminal justice. And I was, like I said, I'd already been a school teacher. They asked me to come work for the drug court program. And that's what I do now here in Middle Tennessee. I work for an adult recovery court program, and we take individuals that have an addiction issue with drugs and or alcohol, and they've been committing crimes, and they're facing jail or prison time, and we bring them out under very, very strict probation. We watch every move they make, and we make sure they get a job and pay taxes and pay their bills and get their families back together. And we also offer drug treatment, man. I teach classes in relapse prevention and recovery skills now every day of the week. And it's where I'm supposed to be. I'm happy where I'm at now. It feels like this is where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's always great. I was talking to you guys earlier today. I've got a recovery podcast on Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time. with me and another guy I work with in the recovery court named Johnny Dawson, and we talk about recovery. And a lot of the people that we work with come on the show. It's fan interactive, it's live, and we talk recovery, and we try to help people out there that are struggling, because I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing now. It's a very, very serious issue, and it's only getting worse. You know, drugs are coming into this country, and like fentanyl, which is killing people left and right. I mean, it's just, there's no, you can't make a small mistake with fentanyl. If you do, you're dead. And that's what's happening. So we're trying to save people, man. We're trying to show people another way. And that's become the labor of love, man. That's my passion these days.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. Congratulations on all this success and recovery. And it's good to see you helping people.
Yeah, that's awesome. For sure. Yeah, because that's definitely so. I know it's definitely an issue in our neck of the woods. And, yeah, that's. But
and I think overall too, you saw it a lot with, I spoke earlier about a lot of the wrestlers that died during that time period of the Attitude Era and stuff, because they kind of backed off on drug testing in those days. And this was before they had a wellness program like they do now. But the boys were left to fend for themselves in terms of if there was mental health issues or drug addiction problems, man. You had to figure that out. I mean, eventually the office might come to your rescue and send you to rehab or something. They started doing that later on, which was a great thing. But, it was like the Wild West. Stone Cold Steve Austin once said, man, it was like the Wild West. We were doing all kinds of crazy shit. And if you didn't have your head screwed on straight, you could go off the deep end real easy. A lot of guys did. And so that's that was the start of my motivation to kind of get into this field and try to help people, man, because I see and hear and know people that are dying every day. And it's not changing. It's unfortunate, but all we can do is all we can do, and if we can save one today, man, we've done a great thing.
Absolutely,
I agree.
One more time, if you could plug that podcast for us that you.
Yeah, on Fridays I do a live stream. I also use the StreamYard, and it streams live to Facebook, my Facebook page, which is Mike Droese. It also streams right to my YouTube page, which is Duke the Dumpster Official. It's on there, Duke the Dumpster Official. It's called the Recovery Podcast. You can see it live Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We talk some really good recovery, man. It's a great show. And I also do a Saturday evening show called Trash Cam Live that we talk wrestling and we talk other stuff, and we just kind of goof around. And that's on the same channels. It's Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's kind of what we're doing now as far as the social media. And I'm taking bookings for conventions and stuff like that. I don't have any right now, but taking bookings for conventions.
And you said you're in Tennessee?
I am. I'm in Middle Tennessee, which is McMinnville, which is right between Nashville and Chattanooga, right in dead center Tennessee.
All right, so we'll get with you when it comes to talking about conventions and stuff, because we're always looking for somebody to come and be at our table. So, yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man.
And we'd love to do some maybe some cross podcast stuff with your podcast as well.
If we can help out in any way, promoting anything, just let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that, guys. I really do. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much for coming on, and you have a great evening.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me on the show, man. It was a great interview, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Have a good one. Hey, everybody, it's Morty.
It's Brian.
And thank you for watching today's episode of Developmentally Speaking.
If you could, please click that subscribe button.
And don't forget to punch that bell icon so you can get notified whenever we go live or drop a new video every Monday. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next
Developmentally Speaking.